You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper.
I saw the Grim Reaper as a kid. 8-word summation: I saw the Grim Reaper as a kid. The detailed version is a bit longer, if you'll hear me out, as I even questioned what it was that I most definitely saw that night. I promise, this is not no sleep. If it sounds like a story, it's because I've told it so often. When I was very young, my mum was still a dog breeder of Cocker Spaniels. It was the summer between kindergarten and the first grade. Very early 80s. I'm not sure anymore because I started kindergarten earlier than most. One of the Cockers had just had puppies. She was notoriously a very high-strung dog who was a horrible mother. I'm not sure if she would smother, carelessly injure, or ignore her pups, but for that reason, the pups were kept away from her after they fed and put in a laundry basket with a heating pad on low and a towel for the night. Me being a kid and they being puppies, I begged Mum to keep the basket in my room that night. The basket of pups was placed in front of my door to hold it open, with a nightlight nearby. As a kid, I needed a nightlight and also had to have my door open. Fear of the dark and being trapped in it, I guess. All that done, I fell asleep to the whimpers of newborn pups and the sound of the pump in my fish tank. Nothing out of the ordinary at the time. At some point, I awoke in the middle of the night to the frantic squeals and cries of the puppies. But they sounded tinny, distant, like in a tunnel or across a warehouse from me. Even my fish tank sounded off, like my ears were blocked by sinus pressure. I rolled over to check on them, or to go get my mum, but there was something crouched near the basket. At first I thought it was my mum. I think I even asked, "Mum?" It was dark, hunched over, squatting near the laundry basket. What I thought was my mum's nightgown was just a black garment draped over it. The thing's back was to me. The nightlight didn't even illuminate it. If anything, it was smoky and translucent, like ink in water. When I spoke to it, it turned around towards my bed. I saw a skull in the black shape where a head should be. Sometimes in my memory, it had red dot eyes. Sometimes I remember them empty and black, but I knew it looked right at me. I swear its jaw snapped open, maybe surprised I saw it, or to scare me. It worked. I screamed. I screamed for my mum in the room just next door. It sounded like my screams went nowhere. Looking back now, I really think the whole room was in a bubble of time or sound, so this thing could do whatever it was doing. The thing pulled back from the basket and spun around, this skull in a cloak, like it was on all fours, but I didn't see hands on the ground. It started coming towards me, working its jaw. I remember it grinning. I remember it hanging open. It skittered across the 10 to 12 feet from the door to my bedside. I hid under my blanket. That's all I remember. I guess I passed out. When I woke up, I ran straight to my mum and told her everything, furious as to why she didn't save me. She said she didn't hear a peep, apologized, tried to calm me. I drew a picture of the cloaked skull sitting beside the basket to describe what I saw. At this point in my life, I had never seen Reaper iconography. I had no idea what I was drawing. I knew what a skull was, but that was the extent of my death knowledge. She kept the drawing in her jewelry box, and later a Bible. It's since been long lost. Flash forward years later, I'm probably 10 and I see my first depiction of the classic Grim Reaper in art, on the cover of an old Hitchcock short story paperback. It blows my mind. Besides the scythe, it's the closest thing to what I saw. I go back to Mum, flabbergasted, to again show her what I saw. At this point, I guess she thinks I'm old enough to be told that 3 puppies had died that night, and she removed them before I woke up. But that was in the sunny morning, not the dark night. She admits she believes I saw something, and she had no explanation for what it was. There are things we just don't understand. So now I'm an adult, and I've been pretty skull and death obsessed ever since. I still believe in the paranormal, but have had no other encounters. There was even a period around 10 to 12 where I talked to the darkness of my room, trying to bring it back so I could ask questions. It never returned. So feel free to tell me I had a nightmare, or sleep paralysis, or a night hag. I don't know if I saw the Reaper, or an energy vampire, dimensional demon, ghost, whatever. I don't have that answer, but I saw it. I had no exposure to death imagery beforehand. Animals died in its presence. I've never been able to remove that image of it from my mind. So please tell me what you think it was. I was living in a Baltic state at the time, and was young, maybe around 5 years old, but no more than 7. I was asleep one night in a small bedroom with barely any walking space between a bunk bed and a table closet. I was asleep on the bottom bunk and my sibling on top. It was summertime, and the window towards my feet was cracked open. Anyway, I woke up and saw a dark person, around 6 foot, walking towards the window, holding what looked like a dim candle in the left hand. At that point, I was sort of frozen in fear and was trying to pretend I was still asleep. But I was peeking with my eyes and trying to control my breathing. So after walking slowly towards the end of the bed, it turned back around, and at this point, I was trying so hard to stay calm. I remember swallowing or gulping a lot, and I could see it was some sort of a robe it was wearing, with just darkness for the face. Now, since it was facing me and slowly walking towards me, I could see the candle better. The fear was getting to me, and I closed my eyes and I called for my mum to use the bathroom. I was just scared of the dark, I guess. As I heard my mum get up from the other room, I peeked and saw the thing get underneath the bed by my feet. My mum opens the door and asked what I wanted. Her face just looked tired. I told her I needed to pee and immediately went to the foot of the bed to see where it went. There was just a bunch of books, cheap toys and other things. Basically no way something could have fit under. I went to the bathroom and then went back to bed. I fell asleep again, and I'd say maybe 30 minutes to 1 hour later, I woke up again and saw the same thing walking towards me. No noise was made. I did have a rug in the walkway, and my sibling had been asleep on the top bunk the whole time. I felt that scared, stuck feeling again, as it creeped slowly towards me with the candle. I closed my eyes tightly and reopened them after about 10 seconds, and it was gone. I never saw anything resembling that ever since. Just a note, that country doesn't have Halloween or is big into costumes, so that's one thing I ruled out. Second thing, I didn't know what I saw until I immigrated to the US and watched The Simpsons. Second note, I didn't know what I saw until I immigrated to the US and watched The Simpsons episode, and saw the exact same thing in one of the Halloween episodes. When somebody is about to pass away, they enter a stage known as end of life. I had a fair amount of experience working with end of life patients before now, but had never actually been there for their passing. This is relevant because we had one such gentleman who came into room 2. I remember the night of his arrival fairly vividly, as it was only a couple of days before that we'd said goodbye to the previous occupant of the room. Room 2 had a week to live, according to the specialists that had moved him in during the day. But this particular story takes place 9 days after they had reached this conclusion. He'd been unsettled during the day. However, the staff had waited for my arrival so as I would do something about it. I wouldn't mind, but this meant I had to go through out-of-hours GP and nurses, which is a massive piss take. Nevertheless, the man was dying, so I rang out of hours, and there was a syringe driver by about 3 a.m. A 7-hour wait, during which the man could have died. During this time, he kept holding onto the curtain next to his bed. Initially, I thought for comfort, as it is quite typical for the dying to want to hold something for that very reason. That's until he started asking about the man outside. His voice was little more than a whisper, so you had to lean in to listen. This is definitely what he's saying. "The dark man outside, who is he?" I went outside and checked, as always, but there was no one there. When I came back inside, I tied a knot in his sheet, and that was that. He didn't die that night, but at 9 a.m, not long after he'd gone home. It's interesting to note that it's quite common for people who are dying, particularly the elderly, to see a dark figure of some sort. I've a flair for stories about these dark figures, but I chose to tell this one because this is one of the characters pointed out. Typically, it's just a vague hint that someone else is in the room, but this man actually came out and said it. He was a nice guy, by the way. Frankensteins, Draculas, zombies, mummies, and many more were all on the dance floor. The whole club was full of monsters. Tonight, it's Halloween. One of my friends asked me to come out and go clubbing with her. Everyone was dressed in costume. The music was blasting out of the speakers. Everyone was enjoying themselves and the festivities of the night. It was really weird to see all these creeps and ghouls flirting and dancing. I came to the club dressed as a witch, but since I'm quite a shy person, I was spending most of the night against the wall, sipping on my drink and watching my friend dance. Just when I was regretting my decision to come, a guy in a costume approached me. He came as the Grim Reaper. He wore jet black hooded robes. Out of the darkness of his costume, his bony white skull mask stood out like the moon in the night sky. The Grim Reaper grabbed my hand. It was icy cold to the touch. He pulled my hand as if to escort me. Since I was alone and curious, I followed. It was more exciting than standing alone all night. We weaved in and out of the people dancing on the dance floor. At that moment, someone grabbed my other hand and shouted into my ear, "Don't go." I spun around to see who it was, and as I did, whoever it was let go of my hand and disappeared into the dance floor. The Grim Reaper guy let go of my hand too. I didn't realize how cold it was until he let go. I looked for him, but I couldn't see him anywhere. The next morning, it was reported in the news that some residents nearby had found Halloween costumes strewn around the neighborhood. Were these the costumes of the people who followed the Grim Reaper outside? I don't know what happened to those people, but I'm sure I wouldn't be around today if I had followed him outside. Who was the person who stopped me? Who was the Grim Reaper? What happened to those people? I have lots of unanswered questions. Thinking about it still gives me the chills. Hello watchers and listeners. Thank you so much for watching. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. I couldn't do this without you. And of course, thank you to all of those who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it so much. And remember,
Papa loves you.